Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 2 of the We Believe You podcast. I am your host, Steven, joined with my co-host,
Lonnie.
Today we're just going to be talking about childhood stories, just kind of the weird, unbelievable things that we experienced when we were kids, the kind of stuff that you tell your parents and they tell you that it's all in your head, that it never happened. I think we all got that kind of story. So once we always want to hear yours. Send them in to us. But tonight we're specifically just kind of talking about us.
Because we're super vain like that.
Yeah.
So just wanted to put it out there. But
we do have a few stories that involve other people.
Yeah, for sure.
Little ones.
Oh, we're not that vain.
Sometimes.
But welcome back. Thank you for getting through episode 1 and joining us for episode 2.
Yeah. Our puppy Birdie is a little calmer on this go around. Hopefully not as much background noise. Yeah.
Unless the theme will be she sleeps before and after recording and is a monster during recording.
Which is what happened.
Which she just perked up and is watching TV now. But
yeah.
Yes, we are joined with our other co-host, Eric the Pug, who is asleep, and Birdie the dog.
Hashtag a dog named Birdie.
But so we're going to talk about some childhood stories of ours that kind of impacted us and has kind of made us as the weirdos that we are today.
And like going back on it, like one of my first memories that I have is like a weird, I think it might actually be a memory of my first dream that I can remember. But I remember being a little kid, like 2 or 3 years old, and just waking up and walking down the hallway in my parents' house and looking in the hallway bathroom, and like I just remember the toilet seat opening on its own and just like going up really slowly. And I remember being a little kid and just not comprehending what I was seeing. And I was just like, oh, whoa. Like, it was just like a mind fuck, even at such a young age. Yeah. So that's literally one of my first memories ever. And somebody jokingly told me the other day, they're like, I think that's like a false memory.
Well, I think that was me, because what I was going to say is I believe you. Again, I believe you. But it reminds me of Look Who's Talking.
Yeah.
And the toilet is trying to get the toddler, to go pee-pee in the potty. And he's like, hey, I want your pee-pee. And I think your toilet was telling you to go pee-pee in the potty.
It didn't speak to me. That's the thing. It just opened. Like, very, like, lid and all. It was just closed, and then it just slowly went up. It didn't talk. But, like, see, that could be totally...
So
either
was
way.
The ghost...
I'm not saying...
Was the ghost going pee, you think?
No, I'm not saying it was ghosts.
But it was probably ghosts.
It was definitely ghosts. Yeah, a lot of weird things happened at my parents' house growing up. And I seemingly was the only one that was experiencing any of it.
Yeah, still to this day, even when we're at dinner at your parents' house and it comes up, your mom's and everybody still kind of...
My dad's on my side.
Yeah, your dad's on your side, but everybody else just seems to kind of like brush it off all willy-nilly, like, nah.
Yeah, they don't exactly have the minds that are directed towards this kind of belief system.
Yeah.
Most of my family writes off paranormal things, or if something's just unexplainable, then they just kind of get creeped out and just push it deep down.
Mm-hmm.
But,
they probably try to, like, find reason as to why things happen. Yeah. Where we, on the other hand, I, on the other hand, just like I said, it's ghosts.
Like a lot of religious people out there, like to write off, like science or this, and they're like, no, it's God, and that's where the conversation ends. I think I like to do that with just paranormal shit. So it's like something happens, They're like, oh yeah, there's a perfectly logical explanation for this. I'm like, yeah, ghosts, dog, or aliens, or that was fucking Bigfoot, man.
Yeah, it could have been.
So yeah, but yeah, so that's like really like one of my earliest memories, and it's weird that I'm 33 now, and I like just remember that. And whether or not it is from the movie that I'm remembering, or like a dream, or that actually happened to me, like I don't know. But
did you go to the bathroom and did your family make a train chanting pee pee in the potty around your living room?
no.
Okay, then maybe it
Not that I know of.
Maybe it wasn't the movie then.
Shit was fucking weird though in the 80s. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what my family was doing.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, and then like a little bit like kind of more into my life, something happened around like 3 or 4 that like I literally have no recollection of. But at some point, like I was too scared to sleep in my own room that I slept in my sister's room on like a trundle bed. For like, and I don't even know how long I did that for. And like I would go in my room and play with my toys during the day, but as soon as it was nighttime, I was fucking out of there. I wouldn't sleep. And like I wish that like I could remember what it was that scared me so much about my room. But I remember being a little kid, like every night, like I would be going to sleep and just like literally like talk to the monsters I thought were in my room. And I would like give them offerings of like toys to like leave me alone for the night. I'm like, all right, here's like my Ninja Turtles over here. Like here's you take these instead of me.
Yeah.
And like
it's a good offering.
Yeah. And then like, just weird little shit always happened. If you're going upstairs from the basement, you just always feel like something's running right behind you. Mm-hmm. Just like, yeah.
I kind of like, I had that too as a little kid where I lived in a 3-story house.
Jesus.
And whenever we were in the basement and we'd go upstairs, I could never just walk up the stairs. I had to run up the stairs.
Yeah.
And my sister and I, we would fight each other running up the stairs to where, it turned into where, it was like we were racing. I always felt like something was like, I'm gonna get you, like right behind me. And so like I don't know if that's like a kid thing or whatever, but like I could never just nonchalantly walk up the stairs. Like I had
still
to
do
just
that at my parents'
sprint
house.
Up them.
I still do that at my parents' house, and one day I'm just gonna break through the stairs.
Yeah, there was a few times I definitely crashed, like going up them because you're trying to go so fast because there was just this fear. But it was weird because it was only in the basement, like because it was a fully finished basement. Like I said, it was a 3-story house, so our basement had like bathroom. That's where the laundry room was. That's where our TV room was, couches, everything. And then our main floor was sitting area with the fireplace, the kitchen, and then the loft upstairs was 2 bedrooms.
Yeah, this is the Roslyn house?
Yeah, this is when I lived in Roslyn. And so, but it was always in the basement that I felt like. But I also think that this goes back to my cousin Charlie always fucking with me as a kid and telling me, that the guy that lived here before died in this house and he had a heart attack. And he would always say it happened right there. And he'd always tell me it happened in the basement. Mm-hmm. And he would like walk over and be like, he had a heart attack right here. Is it true though? No, Charlie was just being mean to me. Like, no, he was just fucking with his little cousin. He probably, like, if he were to hear this right now, he'd probably be like, no, I never did that to you. No, you definitely did that to me. But, so it could have been that fear of thinking that the old man was going to, like, be mad at me for being in the basement.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I would.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
If I woke up from like just recently dying, and I'm like at my house, I'm like, sweet, my house. Next thing I know, I got like 5-year-olds fucking with all my shit.
I was little and I looked like a troll, so he probably was just like, what is this little blonde-haired, big blue-eyed little
you look like an Olsen twin mixed with like a troll doll.
Yeah, like the ones that had the gem on the belly button. Yeah, like if I had like a red gem on my belly button, I could have been one of those trolls.
That'd be so adorable.
But I have too much boob now to pull that off, I think.
I mean, you should try. But yeah, and then I guess growing up in my house, like there was always just little things that happened. And like my mom would always just like try to ride it. Like I remember one time, like a lot more things started happening when I was a teenager there, and I mean I got no real good explanation for it, but like I remember one time laying on the couch downstairs and the back, and I had the remote control on my chest, and the back plate popped off, and the batteries that were in there, like this regular Costco brand AA batteries, were like fizzing battery acid. And I was like, what the fuck? And I like knocked them on the floor and they just like kept fizzing out. And my mom's like, oh, batteries just do that. And I'm like, all right. And the hundreds of thousands of batteries I've used in my life, two of them have done that. All right. But like you always felt like you were getting watched down there. Super creepy. But yeah, that was one of those weird ones. But I think the most prominent thing that happened in that house like was when I think I was either a sophomore or a junior in high school. And I was up like talking on AOL Instant Messenger to a friend. And I'm just, a shitty little teenager. And my door is kind of open. And the door opens and I see my sister walk in, but I'm like typing, I'm not paying attention to her. And I see her walk in past me like in my peripheral, and I'm like, what do you want? And I'm like just telling her to get out of my room. And then I hear her get on my bed. And I'm like, what the fuck? And then I turn around and there's like no one in my room. And I'm like, what the fuck? And so I get up and I go and I knock on my sister's room and she's like in her room with the door locked. I'm like, what did you want? And she had like no idea what I was talking about.
Oh, that's weird.
And then like I was just like, oh shit. Like that was like my first like I think encounter with like actually seeing something that wasn't like physically there. And I was like, oh shit, that's super fucking weird. And then just like, it was always like little things. Like, I'd go to press play on my record player, and there'd be like a different record than I remember leaving in the record player in there. And I was the only one who ever did it. And there was one time that I was there with my buddy Ferg, and we were just sitting in my room, and we had smoked some weed. But we were.
I feel like all your stories are gonna have some sort of
for
acknowledgement and
so for the
tip of the hat to weed.
Yeah, the listeners that will kind of get that there's a vibe between my lifestyle. It's very much so. But I kind of think that doing certain substances or putting things in your blood kind of helps like break the veil down a little bit of like what we all collectively agree on as being reality. And I think we kind of anything that doesn't fit that mold, like we literally just like mentally block out. And I think like smoking weed or doing psychedelics kind of breaks that down a little bit to where you can actually experience more. And so whether or not it's something that actually happens or it's just something that your brain is tricking you, I don't think it makes either experience any less valid or real, kind of, because you're experiencing something different. And until people try it, they'll never know. There's a theme behind a lot of my stories, I guess. But yeah, I remember we're just sitting in there, and I was telling him about some weird shit that happened, and then my radio, like my record player thing, turned on, and like the remote was like across the room from both of us.
That's so strange that you say that because the exact same thing has happened to me. Like we had, I remember this because we had a foreign exchange student from Denmark, and her name's Camilla, and it was my sophomore year, and I was explaining to Camilla some of the stories that had happened to me, that I'll tell in a little bit, but and out of nowhere, and I was explaining some of the things I had experienced, my radio turned on and it was full blast. Damn. There's no timer on it. There was, again, I did not have the remote near me or anything, and I never listened to my radio on full blast, and the volume was all the way up to where when it turned on, we were so shook by it that we like froze because it was just like, what, like it like took our breath away. It was so scary because it was just like just loud music out of nowhere, and it was just like, what the hell, like how, why, like it was just so weird, and it never happened again. Like I said, no time or anything. It just never happened again. Just that one time.
Yeah, that's fucking weird. I remember when that happened. Like at the time, I was at that part where I'm just kind of like starting to embrace like the paranormal shit is real and like actually exists. And I remember when it happened in my head, I was like, yeah, validation. And
Right.
Ferg was like, what the fuck? He's like, he was out. I think he left.
Oh yeah, I'm
But
sure he was probably like,
there's
bye.
there's been a few times where like things that have happened have been validated, like uh, Mexico at the Shoreline House.
Yeah. Well, and
That's
it's
a story for another episode. But
well, and I'm sure it's happened to many people where they I mean, it could happen right now where we're talking about this kind of thing, or it could be happening when you're talking about fucking NASCAR. I mean, who
yeah,
knows? You know, like
yeah,
it could just happen, and I'm not saying that it was, like a one off or, like all that. But it is just interesting that the timing
yeah.
of these experiences that we both similarly had happened when we were explaining
A lot of
to
a
somebody
lot of
else. Like,
coincidence, a lot of
yeah.
happenstance.
And it's just kind of like, it's just weird. It's unexplainable. And, a lot of people think, oh, I don't believe you, but guess what? That really did happen.
Yeah,
And we had witnesses with us when that happened. So
yeah,
it's just weird that similar experiences, especially around probably the same time. Because, like I said, I was a sophomore in high school, and you were also probably in high
yeah.
school, or
Yeah.
so could have been within around the same time frame. But it's just weird that we both had
Yeah.
similar experiences before even entering
Yeah.
each other's lives.
Yeah, definitely. I think since this episode's all about childhood stories and whatnot, one of my favorite stories that I have is from like around that time period is like not paranormal at all, but it's like a story that I frequently tell and people don't believe me, but it like that's my hiking down in New Mexico story.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just gonna go ahead and tell that one
No,
just to
tell me about
have it documented. um, it was summer in between my ninth grade and 10th grade, but I was in Boy Scouts. I'm an Eagle Scout. But we went down to Philmont Scout Ranch down in New Mexico, and you do like a 65 to 75 mile hike. It's brutal. It's super hot. It's like a super difficult hike. You're in the southern Rockies, like, and I think at one point there was like we were close enough that there was like the Mexican border at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Could be wrong about that, but the first couple days that you're in camp, you have to get acclimated to the hike. So while we're there, we heard a story of a troop that was just getting done with their first hike, or their trip, and their second day on the hike, a kid didn't take a Snickers bar out of his tent, and he was like snacking at night, and a bear literally ripped into his tent, bit the kid on the head, and dragged him out of the tent, and like it woke up. In the first 3 days, you have a guide. So they were lucky that they still had a guide who had a shotgun. And so like they fired a warning shot, the bear ran off. Then as they were tending to that kid, the bear actually went back and was licking the blood off the tent. And I don't know if they were able to kill the bear. I think they probably killed the bear. You'd have to. But so we show up to this story, and like, and
welcome.
like, yeah, welcome. And 10 of the kids in that troop had big enough nuts at their age to keep going with the hike.
Yeah.
I would have left in the helicopter with the kid.
Yeah.
I haven't done. But so we're on the hike. Everything's cool. It's beautiful. But then day 4, so we no longer have our guide. And we were at a dry camp, so there was no place to fill up water or shower. Because along this hike, there was like little camps that you'd stop at, and there was activities you could do. But so I actually got a bloody nose because of the altitude and the dryness. And so I was able to wipe most of it off. But then in the middle of the night, I woke up being poked in the head from the other side of the tent. And like, I thought it was somebody fucking with me at first. I'm just kind of like, and then I could hear it sniffing. And like literally my head lifted like an inch or so off the ground from something on the other side. And that freaked me the fuck out. So I sat up, and what they teach you to do is to start talking and singing, because then the bears or the animals are just like, oh fuck, this is people, I need to bounce. And so I started doing that. and then wake up the guy that's in the tent with me. And, it's waking up a kid at 3 in the morning who's passed out after 15 miles of hiking,
Right.
And dehydrated. And so I tell him there's a bear outside of our tent and he can hear it. And so he freaks out. We just start like singing show tunes like a bunch of fucking weirdos. That's when we have 2 adult leaders from our troop there. And that's when they wake up and they tell us to shut up. And they're like, hey, be quiet. Like, we got an early morning. And I just go, there's a fucking bear outside our tent. And then there's like 10 seconds of total silence. And it's like when you're a 15-year-old kid, in the woods, that felt like 20 minutes of silence.
And all you have is just like tent nylon, like separating you from.
Yeah, and you can hear some kind of animal out there. But then the adult leader just goes, oh my God. And then he goes, well, go check.
Fuck you.
Yeah, that's what I said. And then by this point, like, everybody wakes up, but nobody was man enough to like check, obviously. Yeah. So we all got loud. And then eventually we all fell back asleep somehow. And then woke up the next morning and like half the kids were just like, you were just making it up. And so like me and the kid's name was Morgan that I was in the tent with. And like people just clowned us for like a while. They're like, you fucking liars. There was like no footprints or anything. Mm-hmm. But like literally woke up to it was either a bear or like a wild boar or like, but there'd be mornings you'd wake up and there'd be like the rocks that you were sitting on around the fire would be completely flipped over because the bears come through at night, flip them over and eat the grubs. Right. And so it's like every night there was just like big ass bears walking through that we wouldn't even know. So yeah. So yeah, that's just one of my craziest fucking stories. And I think it was because of the blood on my... Yeah. But like, yeah.
Also, whenever we go backpacking or hiking and I like have my period or something, I'm just like, fuck. Like,
yeah.
Like,
period attracts bears.
Like, this is bad timing. Like, I'm just like, I don't want to get eaten.
Yeah. Well, I guess since we're talking about camping right now, it's a kind of a little tangent away from childhood stories, but it reminds me of when we went up to Dorothy Lake and we were talking to the ranger that's always out there, that creepoid.
Yeah, he's nice.
He's nice, but like when you're trying to take a dump on the side of a hill and like you look up and like you see him standing at the top of that hill, that's just fucking weird. Yeah. Like he's seen me naked so many times. I always get naked and walk out there, but
he's definitely watched me pee.
Yeah, but he was telling us how there was somebody that was freaking out because they were getting visited by Sasquatch. And he's like, oh, he's throwing rocks at my tent. Like he was making weird noises and dropping tents. And the guy was telling us that he didn't have the heart to tell him that it's actually the ravens that are out in the Northwest woods in the Alpine Lake wilderness, where if you set up your tent too close to like their territory, they like go and pick up pebbles and like will drop them on top of your tent. And like literally it's the ravens out there that try to fuck with you. Which is, and I was like, I mean, either that or,
or Sasquatch.
Or the forest ranger is specifically out there trying to like ruin the myth because there's like a really big Bigfoot problem.
He's been paid by the U.S. government to
he could just
deter
he could just be he's a shill. But all right,
it just makes me believe more.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to go out there and ask him some fucking questions.
Yeah.
But back on topic of childhood experiences, I know you have some really good ones, and yours I think will probably span far more over this than just this episode.
Yeah, I think my stories could probably dabble into some future ones. You never know. I have no notes because I'm going strictly off memory. Oh, yeah. So, best of luck to me.
Yeah. That's how all this is going. There's no editing with this podcast.
Right. We have no edits. So, I think this one is an interesting one that it does not actually happen to me, but I think it's kind of a fun, interesting, short story just to kind of kick off with. My grandfather passed away when I was 6. And my cousin Jimmy, who he's named after my grandpa, was born on my grandpa's birthday, and they watched the clock, and they said no, like he was born on his birthday. So they share that, and
I
so
didn't know that part of the story.
yeah, like they were like, no, like they're born the same day. And Jimmy never met my grandfather, but my grandfather before he passed lived with my uncle and my Aunt Debbie. And so Jimmy was named after him. And when Jimmy was, oh gosh, maybe like 3, I know he could talk.
Mm-hmm.
My uncle and them were getting ready to go to like some sort of event. I think it was like a wedding or something. And Jimmy, being a toddler, was just running amok. And my uncle was like, Jimmy, go get ready. Like, go grab your shirt and so we can get you dressed. And, you know, letting him kind of do his thing. But he kept playing and everything. And so he was sitting on the stairs, and my uncle walks out and he goes, James Eugene, you go in there and you get dressed. You know, because they're running late and Jimmy's not doing what he needs to do. And Jimmy, I guess, looked up at my uncle and just turned like white and was just like blank stare kind of thing. And he goes, you don't talk to your father like that. And my uncle was kind of like, what? And so they had this really old photo. My grandfather was like one of, I think, 13 kids. And they never knew exactly which one my grandfather was in the photo. It was just an old one of all the kids together. And they're talking to him, and he said, like, you don't talk to your father that way. And he's like, who are you? And he's like, I'm James Eugene Sullivan. And they're like, him and my aunt are sitting with him, and again, just blank stare, just
and like not talking like a little kid.
Not talking like a little kid. And so the photo was on the wall next to him on the stairs, and they're like, James, which one is you in this photo? And he goes, I'm that one right there. And he points out to the one that ended up being my grandfather.
Yeah, like they didn't even know.
And yeah, after some research, they figured out that was actually him. And so they talked to him it was very short. Like it was, you know, it had to be somewhere between like 2 to 5 minutes. Like it was not an extensive conversation or anything like that. And then I guess out of nowhere, just like snap of a finger, Jimmy kind of like shakes his head, and he just gets up, runs off, and goes and plays. Like just back to normal. Like,
man, little kids freak me the fuck out.
And they were just so like, what the hell just happened? You know, it was. So that one didn't happen to me personally, but it happened within my family, and it was just always something that we just thought was so odd.
That's just why I'm like so terrified to have kids one day.
Yeah, someday.
It's like all the movies and everything. Just, like we said, we're gonna be terrible parents because our kid's gonna be like, Mom, Dad, there's a ghost in my closet, or there's a monster under my bed, and we're gonna be like, holy shit!
We're like, oh my god, we gotta leave.
Yeah, we gotta get a new fucking house, kid. Thanks for letting us know.
Yeah, there's a monster under my bed. We gotta go. Yeah, we're staying at a hotel tonight.
Yeah, Motel 6 it is, kid.
But yeah, so that was just, I thought, a fun one to kind of add in. That was just interesting. And nothing that my cousin, I mean, he was so little, but he didn't remember doing that or anything like that. So just kind of a cool, interesting take on the paranormal, I guess, of all that. But with me, mine kind of started when I was 12. My aunt lived in a rental house with my uncle in Ellensburg, Washington, and it was like 80 something acres that they got with this house and a barn, and
most of which just kind of like flat yellow dead grass kind of.
But it was hills. Hills, but it was so beautiful out there, and they would have cows and horses. So the land was used for other people to come and bring their cattle out. So sometimes the fields would be empty, and sometimes there'd be a ton of cows. But I was I still am really close to my aunt, and I would spend like every weekend out at her house. And she and I, we would bake and we'd do puzzles and we would go play out in the fields, and my cousins would come, and I was always out there. And I think that's kind of where I got this like soft spot for wanting to have my own little farm ranch kind of thing.
For sure.
But the house wasn't originally built there. It actually been moved to that land.
That's weird.
And yeah, how they did it, I have no idea. But the house was moved there, and it was just a total classic farmhouse. You walked in, you got your mudroom with a bathroom right next to it. It had the clawfoot tub. You had a kitchen and dining room, and upstairs there was 3 bedrooms, and the stairs were the kind that go up and then they turn. So right at that corner step, there was like this little room that had maybe a 4-foot ceiling. So as I got older, I wasn't able to fully stand up in it.
Almost.
Almost. But and so that was like this weird little room that had been added on, and my aunt turned it into like the kids' playroom because she's got a lot of grandkids, and with all of the nieces and nephews and her grandkids, we would that was our playroom. And one night my aunt and I were home. It was just us two at the house, and my aunt is a night owl still to this day. And we would stay up super late. Well, I remember I fell asleep on the couch, and she woke me up. She's like, "Lonnie, go up to bed. I'll be up in a little bit." All right. So I get up there, and my aunt has night lights all over her house. One in the bathroom, one in every room, one in the hallway. She just always had night lights. And I'm laying in bed, and there was an attic that had the string hanging from it with like a ball in the end. And I never experienced anything at this house before. So I get up there, and I'm laying in bed, and out of the corner of my eye I see something moving, and I look, and I kind of sit up, and I'm watching the string on the attic door, like the kind that you pull down, just start swinging.
So on its own.
Like on its own, and it's going in a perfect circle. And then it stopped, just dead stop, no like other movement, it just froze. And then it kind of started swinging again, froze. And then when you pull something tight and you let it go and it kind of bounces? It did that. It looked like somebody pulled it tight, let it go. It bounces around, and then it froze again. And that was it. And I was like, that was weird.
Yeah.
So I just rolled over and went to bed. I didn't know what happened. So that was like my first thing I'd ever seen that was like weird, really. And
it's weird when that happens because like your brain almost doesn't know how to like. It's such a weird experience when you see your first paranormal anything.
Right, I didn't comprehend it.
Yeah,
I was a little kid. I knew nothing really about that kind of stuff, and I was just like watching it, and I was like, that was weird. Like,
there's just such a surreal confusion that comes.
Yeah, and so I just went back to bed. Well, as time goes on, not too much has happened, and then one night again, I'm spending the night at my aunt's house, and this is the second time I ever experienced anything. I remember these first 2 so perfectly because they were my first 2 big encounters with anything. So chronologically, this is correct of how it happened. My sister and I, we ended up sleeping in that kid's playroom. My aunt had put some beds in there for the kids and everything. Well, the door was really weird. Like I said, it was an add-on. So where the stairs turned, you actually had to climb up into the door to get into this room. That was only, again, like a 4-foot ceiling. Mm. And my head is laying right by the door. And my sister is on the other side with her head by the door. And out of nowhere, I just am like, got my eyes closed, trying to fall asleep, and I just hear this. And I go, Kelsey, do you hear that? She's like, what? And I go, do you hear that breathing? And she's like, no. And I'm hearing it, and it sounds like somebody is standing at the door breathing into the room.
Yeah.
And so I roll over and I lay against the wall, and I stop hearing it. And I'm like, okay. So and then I rolled back over to see if I heard it again. And again, I'm hearing this, like this heavy breathing. And I'm like, this is so weird. So I'm like, Kelsey, you don't hear this? You don't hear the breathing? And she's like, Lonnie, it's just your mind playing tricks on you. You're just scaring yourself. Just go to sleep. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay. So I roll over and I just curl up against the wall and I fall asleep. I think this is weird. Well, other things started to happen with other people in the house. Nothing as like crazy, but like everybody in the house would wake up at the exact same time at like 3 something in the morning. I want to say it was like 3:20 or 3:21. Everybody in the house would wake up at the same time. Yeah. People would feel tugging on the blankets, like pulling off of them. I remember my cousin said that he went down to get, woke up in the middle of the night, went down and was getting something out of the fridge. And as he's at the fridge, he felt something, or I think like tap him or push him or something like that. And so he just went back up to bed. But my uncle didn't really believe me. But then after a while, he was like, oh yeah, there's something here. And my uncle goes, I named her Becky. And I go, how do you know it's a girl? And he's like, oh yeah, it's a little girl. And then I named her Becky. And I was like, okay, so we always called her Becky. So as time goes on, weirder things happen. And I remember one day, my aunt and I, we went to the grocery store, and I'm on our way back, we park, and I'm carrying groceries. And so I'm doing loads of groceries in and out to bring it while my aunt puts them away. And I'm walking in, and I'm in the yard, and I'm looking up in the window, and I see what looks like a little girl with like short curly hair and like really big bags under her eyes. And she was in like a nightgown. And I'm like, this is weird. And I'm like, it's just like the reflection from the sun and like all that. So I bring in groceries and I do another trip and I walk out and it's still there, looking out the window. So I stop what I'm doing and I set the groceries down and I start walking around the yard to look at it from different angles to see if it is the sun reflecting on it like a weird way with like the screen or something, because you know how screens can, but there was no screen on the window. Yeah. So it was like, it looked like something inside. And as I'm walking around, the reflection or anything doesn't change, and it still looks like a little girl in a nightgown. That's weird. So I finished carrying in the groceries as I'm watching, and each time I kind of look up in the window and I still see this little girl staring out at me, and I'm like, this is weird. So I get inside and I'm done carrying in the groceries and I sit at the dining table. And I'm just, at this point, I'm so perplexed that my aunt even is like, Lonnie, what's wrong? Like, you look weird. And yeah. And I just like, I don't know. Like, I didn't know how, I didn't want to tell her. Yeah. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what I saw.
It's like, you tell people that when you're a kid, next thing you know, you're on all these fucking pills you should be on. Right. And like, so, therapists.
Yeah. So I at that point, I'm like, what the hell? So I walk back outside because I'm like, I'm getting to the bottom of this. I want to know, what am I seeing in this window? And I walk back out there and it's gone. Yeah. And I walk around the yard again. Nope, no reflection, nothing. And I'm like, that's weird.
That's a big old basket of fuck no.
Yeah, right. And I was like, okay, that's weird. Well, then, like, again, time goes on. And one night I'm in bed with my other cousin. And we're just laying there. And again, we had a nightlight. And out of nowhere, on the ceiling, the way the light hit the ceiling, it literally, like, in front of me almost like morphed like into a face. And I was like, did you see that? And my cousin's like, what? And I go, do you see that on the ceiling? She's like, it looks like there's somebody staring at us. And then out of nowhere, moths just appear. Yeah. Ton of moths. And they're just floating around the ceiling, hitting the ceiling. And my cousin's like, Lonnie, what's happening? And my aunt had a fan that held the door open. It wasn't plugged in. She just used that as a door stop. Yeah. All of a sudden, the door starts shaking. And I'm like, Erica, my cousin Erica, like, grabs my hand. She's like, what's happening? And I was like, I don't know. And all of a sudden the sheets just go tight, like tight against our chest, and we both felt like somebody was like standing on our chest, and we were like, it's hard to breathe, and it was just so weird. And I got the strength to take my arms and lift the blankets up and sit up in bed and turn on the light. And as soon as the light turned on, no door was shaking, no moths were in the room, everything was normal. And I run in there and I was like, Uncle Bob, Aunt Mimi, there's something in our room, there's happening in our room. And they're like, no, there's not. Like, just go back to bed. Uncle Bob totally didn't believe us. And so we were just like, okay. That was like the scariest thing that had happened.
Yeah.
But nothing, so that was just like really weird, and the only time I actually felt like threatened. Well, then again, over time, I'm always visiting, and I remember my mom came to pick me up and is driving me home, and my mom in the car was like, because I don't remember ever commuting back and forth between Roslyn and Ellensburg to go see my aunt.
Mm-hmm.
This is the only time I remember driving back from Ellensburg to Roslyn with my mom, and I was sitting in the front seat. And my mom goes, "What's wrong with you? You seem really like weird and quiet." And the whole time, I just did not feel normal. I just felt like I was having an out of body experience, and I was just like, I don't know, I just felt like I wasn't myself. But I remember the drive. Well, that night, as soon as I get home, I feel fine. That night, my mom, again, 3-story house, our TV room was downstairs, and my mom said, "Will you go get me a cup of Diet Coke?" So I go up the stairs into the kitchen to pour my mom a glass, and I'm standing there, and I can feel the full impression of, how like if you look at your hand and you got your ring finger, your middle finger, and then your pointer finger, and they're all 3 different lengths.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you push that into like somewhere that you could push in, and you could feel the different lengths of finger, like, so if you push it into like your thigh, you can feel like different pressures to make it so. Well, I feel that on my back, right on my shoulder, so hard enough to like, it nudges me forward. And so I feel the impression on my back of these 3 fingers, and it nudges me forward, and I hear this in my ear just go, "Lonnie."
Fuck that.
And I go, and I thought it was my brother or sister fucking with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I turned around, and it was like a movie. I turned around and nothing was there, to where I just like started shaking, and I'm literally staring at the empty space in front of me. Like, I'm focusing on space that is in front of me and not anything around it. And I'm like, what the hell just touched me? So I run downstairs, but I don't tell anybody, because I'm like, I don't know I don't know what I just experienced. I was so freaked out. And then I didn't go back to my aunt's house for a little bit. And then like 2 days later, as I'm getting dressed for school, I felt another tap on my shoulder, just like a light, like double tap.
Yeah.
And I turned around and I go, "Becky, stop." And I was just very sincere. And I was in my bedroom by myself, so I just said it out loud, "Becky, stop." And, and then it didn't happen again. And then I went back to my aunt's house, and I never experienced anything at my parents' house again or anything. So I think she somehow came with me and traveled with me.
Yeah.
Well, going forward, my aunt starts to hear the stories. People are, families talking about it, and everything's starting to, come about. And my aunt starts researching the house and finds out that it was, how it was moved, where it was originally located, and trying to figure out if somebody died in the house. But she cannot find any records of anything. So she's like, well, I'm going to have a psychic come. And so she has one come, and the lady she's like, okay, there's definitely a presence here. And she goes into the attic. She starts up there. And as soon as she pops her head in, she felt somebody hit her head, like swipe her head. And she's like, okay, there's somebody hiding up in the attic. And then my aunt, like I said, we did puzzles all the time. So my aunt had stacks of puzzles, and it was on the other side of the house that would be on the opposite side of the driveway. But the stacks of puzzles blocked the window. And the psychic goes, you need to move all the puzzles because she really likes to look out the window.
Creepy.
And my aunt's like, okay. And then she goes, it's a little girl. She's maybe 8, and her name starts with an R. And she's like, I'm getting Rebecca, which is weird because we always called her Becky.
Yeah.
But she's like, I'm getting the name Rebecca. And she goes, and she was about 8 years old, and she died of pneumonia. So that would explain like the heavy breathing and like the bags under the eyes. But and the psychic was getting that her father was abusive, so she'd hide in the attic from him. So like all these things that she's explaining to my aunt, I'm just like going check.
Yeah.
First experience was the attic string. Okay, she would hide up in the attic. You know, I saw her looking out the window. She liked looking out the window. The heavy breathing. If she died of pneumonia, she's gonna have, you know, some sort of lung issues and breathing issues.
Yeah.
And being in a nightgown and everything. And so it was just like really weird how it all played out. And so there's just always been the ghost of Becky. Well, growing up, I always felt that Becky stuck with me because nobody else experienced as much as I did. You know, there'd be here and there things, but everybody's like, Becky liked you. And not too long ago, this person that shall go remain unnamed had informed me that in the house that we live in now, felt a presence of a person. And she said, what about the girl that's living with you? And I said, oh. And I was trying not to feed too much information because if she was feeling something, I didn't want to feed it, and I wanted to know what she had to say.
Yeah. You can tell sometimes when people are fishing, but that's just when the people think they're smarter and better than other people, but they're actually not.
No.
Some people actually are, and those are the ones who trick you.
Yeah. So, I'm kind of asking her questions and everything, and she's like, well, what about the girl that lives here with you, that's here? And I said, well, what about her? And she's like, she's not threatening, and she's like, and she likes you a lot. She's like, she's not your family either. She's like, but she kind of looks up to you like a big sister. She likes your life, and she likes you, and has just always been interested in you and looks up to you. And she's here. And I said, that's probably Becky then. And I said, I've always thought Becky was still with me. And she was like, do you have a spot in your bedroom where you keep your things? Do you have a chair or where you stack your things? And I said, yeah, I have kind of like a corner I put my things. And she's like, well, she likes to be there to be with you. Like, she will go to your things and gravitate towards like your things because she really looks up to you. And she she just always is with you. And I said, yeah, I've never felt threatened by her, but I always felt that she was with me, and I always felt like it was okay. Like, I always felt like she was kind of my little guardian angel, because this is really weird. And I may have mentioned this to you once before, but it's something that I experience every day. When I'm driving to work, I frequently think I see somebody sitting in my back seat.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll look and nobody will be there, but it's like not a scary thing. It's almost like there's just a little girl sitting in my back seat. And so I think Becky is kind of like my guardian angel to help me with, because there's been so many times with my commute, how many times I've been in like almost terrible accidents and things where it's like,
well, that's because you don't pay attention.
Slip, one little like a second later kind of thing, I would have been in a huge accident kind of thing. But I always felt like she was kind of like my little guardian angel on things. And
let's do something creepy real quick, since this is a paranormal podcast.
All right.
And we're just sitting here recording on my Samsung Galaxy S8 Active. Not fishing for sponsors or anything, but this S8 Active sure records all right.
Yeah, it does.
But since it's a paranormal podcast and we're talking about something that we think could be with us still, why don't we let Becky herself talk into our microphone?
Yeah.
So we'll just give her a second where Hey, Becky, if you're here, sorry guys, this is a tangent, but Becky, if you're here, say hello into this little microphone right here.
Give us a little tap or something.
Yeah, do something. This will be for the. Be so fucked up if we played it back and like you just hear like a tiny little hello. God, I'd shit my pants.
I would probably as well.
I hope this also isn't like inviting shit like you're not supposed to do. Like,
I don't think I'm inviting her because she's already here.
that's true.
I don't want anything negative.
You're not like supposed to like, I guess, encourage it. I guess.
I'm not saying, hey, stick around. I'm just saying she's here and she hasn't done anything to make me think otherwise.
If you're here, just say hello and introduce yourself into this microphone.
Tell us a little about yourself.
All right, well that's all the time we have for her to talk in there.
Yeah.
God, she just wouldn't shut the fuck up, would she?
Just kept going. And you know what? No.
Oh man.
But so that was kind of like my big thing that with her that has just always stuck with me and always stood out. I mean, I've had other things as getting older and everything and what I've experienced as an adult, let it be with you or independently, but that kind of like really opened the door in my mind to paranormal and made me very intrigued by it and more interested in the unknown because there was just a lot of things that were just weird to me and there's some things that could be explainable or anything like that, but I also like the experience that I had with it because there was only one time that was, somewhat terrifying, but everything else was a peaceful experience, I guess you could say. Like, yeah, it caught me off guard and maybe scared me at the moment, but like looking back on it, they were peaceful experiences. Yeah. Nothing too crazy, but growing up with that and opening my mind up to that, I started being a little bit more sensitive to where, getting into my teenage years, into my early 20s, I could walk into a house and like feel something and I could like look at somebody and say, is your house haunted? I can feel something. And they could say, yeah, we've had some weird stuff happen, or have you ever experienced anything weird here? Like, there's just feelings I can get, and yeah. I can get easy feelings, or I can get really I'm not saying I'm some sort of like medium or anything.
Yeah. You can tell the energy.
But yeah, you could feel the aura, the energy of a place that you go. And
there was like when Random Orbits, my old band, was getting started, we were looking for rehearsal studios in Ellensburg. And whatever that building above the Japanese restaurant is, where it had all the art lofts, there was an open room, and our drummer Blake and I walked in there, and there was just like horrible feeling of just total sadness and just negativity. And then we joked about it being haunted. And then when we were talking to the owner, we joked about that, and he's like, yeah, well, you're not the first to say that, and somebody actually hung himself in that room.
Oh, creepy, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's just like, you could fucking feel it. So
yeah,
I get sensing that energies and auras of rooms, places, even people. Like, sometimes you meet somebody, and you can just tell, like, before they even say a word, or they could even look like a clean-cut, normal, run-of-the-mill, nice person, and you can just sense, like, you're fucked up. You've done some bad things.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you've definitely could. I wish I could read auras and stuff. I think it'd be great and like see people's like aura color and everything, but I definitely can get vibes off people to where I'm like, I'll be cordial, but I maybe not necessarily want to be a friend. Yeah. No reason to be a dick to them, but it's like I can just feel your energy sucking my energy.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
I don't need that in my life.
It's like psychic vampires.
Yeah.
You could just, and it's like, not to get all Alex Jonesy on people, but like, that's like a legit thing. Like, we've all known somebody that like just being around them drains you.
Yeah.
And just fucking, you can go from being a positive, great day to like,
and it can be exhausting.
yeah, just exhausting, drains you, and then you're negative and cranky, and like, that's not the definition of stealing someone's energy. I don't know what the fuck is, you know?
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, I think that's like the major things that I experienced growing up. And then like I did have an experience as an adult that the same time that this person was asking me about Becky being with me, and we've lived in our house now for a couple years,
2.5, yeah.
and never really felt anything too crazy. I've had a couple of like odd experiences. Like when we first moved in, I heard like a little girl giggling, and threw me off a little bit, but I was like, all right. But then I started having experiences where I felt like somebody was with me, but it was a different somebody. Like, I think I got so used to having some sort of energy with me that this energy was different. Not bad, not negative at all. Very warm, fine. But startling. It was startling me because I hadn't really felt it before. And there would be times where I would see, like, a flash of somebody behind me. Like, let it be in a reflection. Like, and it mostly happened in our kitchen where I would be, like, standing there cooking and, like, in the reflection of like the microwave or something, it would look like somebody was standing behind me and they had long dark hair, short. I thought it was like a small person,
like a little person,
like not like a little person, but like shorter than me, you know. And but it was so fast that there was never a face or anything. It was just like one of those like, yeah, just so fast that that's all I could see. And that happened for a while, and I was like, okay, whatever. I'm freaking myself out. I'm not gonna get my mind going, you know, how I do. Well, then this person, when they were over, they're like, okay, talking about the little girl, and then she goes, well, what about the older lady? And I was like, wait, what? There's two people? She's like, yeah, there's an older lady here. And she's like, this one's family. She's like, she's family, and it's an old lady. And I was like, okay. And she starts describing a few things. And she's like, I see her as old. She's like, but you don't. You see her as young. You see her as a young woman, and I see her as an old lady. I was like, okay. She's like, I was like, can you describe what I see? And she's like, you see long dark hair, short. And she's like, you know, 30s maybe, just a young person. She's like, I see old gray hair, short gray hair, and all this. And I was like, if I showed you a photo, would you know if it's her? And she's like, yeah. And I said, okay. And I have a picture of my grandmother. I have a picture of my grandmother and my grandfather when he was in World War II. I have one of those portrait photos of them where he's in his uniform and she's in her got her hair with like the pinup rolls kind of thing, and just a beautiful young lady. And I show her the photo and she goes, that's who you see. That's exactly who you see. And my grandma had long black hair. And then I said, okay, is this who you see? And I showed a picture of my grandmother older, and she's like, that's exactly who I see.
Yeah.
And she's like, with the short gray hair and everything. And I was like, okay, that's weird. And she was like, your grandma really likes this corner in your dining room. And the dining room is right next to the kitchen, and the corner that she was explaining is exactly the corner that you can see in the reflection of the microwave. And I was like, okay. And in that corner is our china cupboard, our small little china cupboard that has a lot of memorabilia from my grandfather from when he was in World War II, photos of him and my grandmother, and, you know, a few things from our wedding and china and stuff like that. she's like, she really likes this corner. And she was like, I don't know where she goes, do you have any sherry? And at this point, I didn't know what sherry was. It's like, what's sherry? And she goes, like cooking wine. It's called sherry. Do you have any cooking wine? And I said, no, I don't have sherry. She goes, okay. Do you have any bourbon? And I was like, yeah, I got some bourbon. It's not even open. She's like, okay, Grandma wants us to take a shot. And I was like, you're fishing to get drunk, but all right, we can take a shot.
Yeah.
And she goes, okay, well, you need to pour a shot and put it in your china cupboard. Grandma really likes bourbon. Put it in the cupboard. All right, so I put a shot in there, and I still got it sitting in there, whatever. So I thought that was kind of weird, She says that she's really interested in your life. She's really proud of you and all this stuff. And I never met my grandmother, but my mom says I'm exactly like my grandma. She told me that when I became a teenager, like with just like my personality and stuff, she was always like, you're just like your grandma. And I always thought that was special because I never knew her.
Yeah.
Well, I went over to my parents' house like a week later, and I said, Mom, I got some interesting questions for you, and I'm just gonna ask them, and you don't have to tell me anything. I said, what was Grandma's favorite alcoholic beverage? And she said 7 and 7.
Yeah.
And is that bourbon or is that whiskey?
Well, Seagram 7, I don't know if it's bourbon, because it's like, bourbon is specific to like Kentucky.
Yeah. So she said it was 7. Yeah, she said 7 and 7s, and I said, okay. And then she's like, and she liked bourbon. And I was like, okay. So she did mention bourbon. And I was like, oh, that's okay. Well, my grandfather owned his own trucking business, and he was always going all around like the West Coast. Well, my mom starts laughing. She goes, oh my gosh, I got the funniest story though. Grandma loved her booze. And she goes, Grandpa would always get alcohol in California because it was a cheaper tax and everything.
My grandparents did the same thing.
So she's like, so Grandpa was out on a trucking job and wasn't back yet, and we ran out of alcohol. She was like, so we had no booze in the house. So Grandma got so wasted on sherry, and she starts cracking up. She's like, oh my God, it was so funny.
Not knowing the
story.
Yeah.
And she's like, she was so wasted on sherry, da da da. And I just was like, I gotta go. And I like walked out of the room, and I try not to cuss in front of my mom, but I kind of have a trucker mouth, so it's really hard.
Yeah.
But I need to fucking step away. I was like, holy shit, I'll be right back. And I'm just like, what the fuck? And I'm pacing. I go in there and I tell her the story, and I was like, and I was informed that Grandma loved bourbon. And my mom's jaw drops and like covers her mouth, and I go, and then I was asked if I had any sherry because Grandma liked sherry. Which apparently this is a prime story of my grandma. Like,
yeah, you had no idea about.
That I had no idea about. And my mom starts crying. She's like, oh my gosh, like, Grandma's with you. And she's like, sometimes I can sense when Grandma's with me. She's like, because I'll be driving. And my mom hasn't smoked in years and years, probably like 20 years now. But she's like, but sometimes I'll get whiff of like cigarette smoke in my car when I'm driving.
That's wild.
And she's like, and that's when I know that like Grandma's with me. Because I can smell like a cigarette. She's like, but like Grandma's with you. So I don't think she's with me anymore. I think she could be bouncing around a family, if anything.
Yeah. Getting to know the family she didn't know.
Yeah. So, but like, I thought it was really special that like it was brought to my attention, these couple things, and that my mind wasn't totally playing a crazy trick on me and then having it, somebody explain it and then all that. So that was some interesting stuff. But anyways.
But yeah, I think that's probably good for episode 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you enjoy our stories, they're only going to be getting kind of better. We're going to be having some interviews, friends, family, whatnot. A lot of good stories. So yeah, just keep checking back. We're going to be hitting up the people that have sent us theirs and, try to work something out. So hopefully we have a lot of great new content, crazier stories. Just wanted to give you kind of a background on us before we dove into other people. So, yeah, thank you very much. If you're still listening, subscribe, tell your friends.
Yeah. If you have any stories, go ahead and email us at the We Believe You podcast at gmail.com.
Like us on Facebook.
We'll have Instagram soon.
Yeah. By the time you hear this, we will have an Instagram. So, We Believe You podcast.
Yeah. And
one word.
and again, special thanks to everybody that's listening. Still sponsored by nobody.
Oh, yeah.
Music done by Tim Held. And still no graphic designer, soon to come.
And shout out to all the people in the Hardcore Paranormal group on Facebook. A lot of you guys are the ones who have joined our page so far. So we appreciate you. But thank you. Can't wait to hear your stories. And we believe you. Bye.